Yes. I think with that, we can absolutely get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tyler Huff, and on behalf of Chicago House, I'd like to welcome you to this fireside chat on legal issues and challenges in the transgender communities. Before we get started, I'd like to offer just a few notes. We are streaming live on Facebook, and this recorded conversation will be emailed to you all within the next 24 hours. So keep an eye out for that and feel free to share broadly. We recommend closing any devices other than Zoom, and feel free to chat Chicago House if you experience any technical issues. And then lastly, we hope that there will be time at the end to take some questions. So please use the Q&A box to submit those questions. And with that, Chris, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to have this conversation tonight. My name is Chris Jensen. I am the engagement chair for the Associate Board for Chicago House. If you ever want to know what the Associate Board does with Chicago House, I love to talk about it. So just reach out to me and I will talk your ear off. But tonight, my goal is to talk as little as possible because we have these phenomenal, accomplished panelists that just work tirelessly for the trans community, and I can't wait to have a discussion with them. By the way, my pronouns are he, him, his, and so we're going to introduce everyone, and then we're just going to jump right into it. So if Elizabeth, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Ricks. I'm the legal director for the Trans Life Care Program at Chicago House, and my pronouns are she, her, and I will pass it to Alexis.
I'm Alexis Martinez. My pronouns are she, her. I am the current administrative and court support coordinator for the Transformative Justice Law Project. And I will pass it to the Jill Rose Quinn. You have to unmute.
Jill, you're on mute.
I'm glad I'm on mute because I misintroduced myself. My name is Jill Rose Quinn. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm newly elected to the Circuit Court of Cook County as a Circuit Court judge. Oh, I have to introduce someone else. Brianna, you're next.
Hi, my name is Brianna Jenkins. I am the George and Lindsay Fellow at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in Washington, D.C., and I will pass it to Taylor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Brown. I am an attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union in our national office, and I work in our LGBT and HIV project, and I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you, everyone. So exciting. And I will never let Judge Quinn downplay the fact that she is the first out elected trans official in the state of Illinois. And it is a huge accomplishment. And I'm so proud of her and to have her here. So let's kick things off. I would love to hear how each of you got involved in advocating for trans legal rights. If there's a specific instance that pulled you in or some kind of experience that you have, but I would just love to hear that. Alexis, do you want to go first?
Well, first, I guess, I always feel a little awkward being in such grand company. I mean, there are attorneys and judges, and I basically provide court support. My role is, basically limited to what the law allows me to do, but I mean, I gather information for birth certificates, for all sorts of documents, naturalization and everything. And it's just started out before just to do name changes. You show up and you take the people through the various procedures, and I've sort of expanded it all the way out, to naturalization documents, name changes on naturalization, and one of the problems that I see, big problems, is that even when even within the state of Illinois, there's different sets of rules. If you want to change, one department, there's no coordination between the departments. You want to getting your name changed at the circuit court is only the very beginning. Then there's processes for the DMV, and then to get your birth certificate and your marriage license. Oh man, that's a monstrosity, and people will come up and say, well, the law says you have to do this, but there is no law on it. It's more administrative, stuff that we have to deal with. So to me, one of my big concerns is that somehow we start to coordinate all of these different requirements within departments so that a person can go through this process. This is really important for transgender individuals because I've seen people get hung up on not being able to get a Social Security because they're born in Louisiana, and Louisiana won't change their name, because an Illinois document doesn't have the birth date on the name change order. I mean, just stuff that, and I've written to the, just state Supreme Court about changing some things in the forms, but you never get a response. So, we're trying.
Taylor, how about you? How did you get involved?
Well, I am now a lawyer in New York City, but before all of that, I was just a little country girl from the South. I'm originally from North Carolina. Jill, I think we're getting an echo. If you'll mute, that would be great. Thank you. Just a country girl from the South, and my first experience really was advocating for myself. I grew up on Medicaid, and before the Affordable Care was enacted, I think it was maybe a year before or a year into my college experience, I was still on Medicaid, and I had started my transition and needed hormones. Medicaid denied it. I went through the administrative appeal process, and just from all of the hardships that I had in my transition when I was in North Carolina, that just sort of made me realize that A, I was good at advocacy, and B, I can make a career out of it, and it was something that I wanted to do. And so that's how I got started.
That's fantastic. I love hearing those kinds of stories because now you are the person that helps people who are like you in your position. So
yes, I am actively pursuing a couple Medicaid cases about to launch from the ACLU, so look out.
Judge Quinn. Obviously, you're not an advocate anymore.
No, I'm not an advocate anymore, but when I transitioned, even when I transitioned, I became acquainted with some people at Howard Brown. At Howard Brown, there were counselors at Howard Brown. At the time, it was the early part of the century, and also in the 90s, when there were lots and lots of AIDS patients who had to go bankrupt because insurance wasn't covering their meds, and they were getting fired and all that awful stuff. And I had a bankruptcy practice, so I started covering a lot of gay men who were placed in that unfortunate financial position. And then from there, I got to know more people in the community. And as I came out, I realized, well, of course, like Taylor said, there are things you have to do for yourself. You have to figure out how to change your name on credit cards, and how to change your name on the Social Security and do a name change. I had to file a motion in the Supreme Court to change my name on the list of attorneys and all those things. So I thought, who better? And I just put it in my advertising that, I've been there. I can help you do this. I don't make any judgments. And I got a lot of people coming to me for those kinds of legal issues. And so they just became part of my practice, representing neighborhood people. At some point, I joined and this is slightly related, I joined the National LGBT Bar Association. I met the first openly transgender judge to serve in this country, Phyllis Fry. Phyllis and I had a conversation, and she said, you got to get out of stealth mode. You got to be visible. You got to get out there. You need to be the third openly transgender judge in this country. And so that kicked me in the butt a little bit. And that's when I started looking to become a judge.
That's wonderful. Yeah, Phyllis will not let anyone be in stealth mode. She is very outspoken.
Right.
Brianna, how about you?
Similar to everybody else, my personal life circumstances caused me to be interested in the law. When I was first changing my name, and then when I changed my gender marker, I had to come up against the legal system. And then before going to law school, I founded and launched my own nonprofit, the Baltimore Transgender Alliance, to respond to the needs of the trans and gender nonconforming community in Baltimore, in the Baltimore metro area in about 2015. And through doing that type of advocacy work, I learned of the legal issues of other people in the community, which trans folks live multi-issue lives. So that kind of, when I went to law school in 2016, I came in wanting to use lawyering as a tool to elevate my advocacy for the community. And now I center a Black trans justice politic in my work. So yeah, just my life being intertwined with the law has always driven my desire to advocate for trans people.
That's awesome. Elizabeth, you want to close this round out?
Sure. So I went to law school to do LGBT rights and wasn't exactly sure what that meant for me. I just wanted to work in community, and it was before marriage, before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This is like 06 to 09. And my first internship at an LGBT org, I noticed a lot of the time and resources were going to issues that were depicted as like LGB. Of course, like trans folks fall under that umbrella, but it didn't really reflect what I was seeing in my community, like in my social circle. Like my friends, the biggest issues they were having were my trans friends who weren't able to access like basic, like the lowest possible bar of asks for access to anything. And so I decided I was a little more interested in focusing on trans rights, and I interned at TILDEF in New York. And it really solidified it for me. And I also have a background in gender studies and have always been interested in sort of fighting misogyny, and the women who are the most marginalized in this country are trans women. So I wanted to work in gender advocacy, and oppression of trans men and non-binary people comes from misogyny too. So it just sort of was a natural fit. And then I stuck with it until from like 2008 until now. I'm very lucky to be able to work in community and do the work.
Thank you all so much. It was amazing. Brianna, you said something that I would love to follow up on, just because it resonates with me so much at the moment. I'm not going to have this panel go forward and not say Black trans lives matter. You mentioned that trans people live multi-issue lives, and you especially work to help trans Black people. What kinds of special, unique issues do you find that they experience?
All of them? No, but seriously, when you talk about Black trans women, or when you talk about trans people specifically, but particularly when you talk about Black trans women or Black trans people, to be inclusive of trans masculine folks and Black trans non-binary folks, you have to have a conversation about poverty and how poverty is criminalized in this country. And we're talking about poverty, we're talking about criminal defense work, we're talking about housing insecurity, we're talking about employment discrimination, not being able to get a job or access employment to take care of yourself. So I don't, for me, I don't see it as one issue. I see it as a complex spectrum of issues, and a solution, just to be solution oriented, it really starts at policies that are inclusive, that are actually created by the people that are most oppressed by the policies that are not working. So this means having Black trans folks at the table, Black trans folks who are not college educated, who don't come from backgrounds where they get access, right? Because we know that college and income level, those are barriers to keep the folks that are the most marginalized out from and away from making decisions that will ultimately impact the trajectory of their lives. So I don't think it's the one particular issue. I just think it's a multiplicity of issues that you have to face, especially when you're navigating poverty, and especially how more and more people will become impoverished as a result of COVID-19 and this pandemic and the state that we're in right now.
Thank you. It's a lot to think about. Alexis, you help people through a lot of the legal process, and don't say you're not an important part because you're not a lawyer or a judge, you're an essential part. What kinds of issues do you help people work through in the courtroom, and what specific challenges do you find?
Well, one of the things that a lot of people, walk into the process with a lot of fear. Part of my whole job and part of my advocacy is to talk to them, let them know, what to expect. I've managed to get to know the judges, the 10 or 12 judges that do, the name changes, and all the clerks in the building, so I have really good working relationships, and part of what I've learned is that you have to approach the task with humility and keep in mind that it isn't about Alexis, it's about getting the client through the process successfully. And for me, that's not sometimes easy because I have a big ego. But the challenges that I see was something I said earlier is learning, it's an ongoing process. I'm constantly checking to see, what the latest update is, for name changes, changing documents in Louisiana or Texas. And, I have to, and people get concerned, even people, and some of the things that we deal with are administrative rather than legal. So you have to learn how to talk to the people in those places and see if you can find a way to bridge those divides. It would be real nice if we could somehow get like a cooperation between the different agencies just inside the state of Illinois. And that's I guess you call that extra legal work.
Speaking of updates in the law, Elizabeth, what is the current state of the law in Illinois protecting trans individuals? I like to brag that we live in one of the best protected states for LGBTQ people in the country, but I know that we still have lots of room to improve. What does the field look like right now?
Yes, we have some great protections and then we have some not great things. So, and Alexis, it was like a perfect segue. So I can touch on some of the policy initiatives that are happening this legislative session in Illinois. One of the big steps that we're taking is Chicago House, ACLU of Illinois, TJLP, Transformative Justice Law Project, and Chicago Bar Foundation are working to amend our name change law. Depending on whose opinion you're asking, we have the most restrictive or second most restrictive name change law in the country. So right now, people with felony convictions, you can't change your name in Illinois for 10 years after that last date of your last sentence. Folks with identity theft convictions can never change their name in Illinois. People who are required to be on a criminal registry can't change their name while they're required to register, and even filing a petition asking for a name change would be a felony. So that is the exact right face to make, Chris. So we filed a bill that would remove the felony barrier. So the last day of your last sentence, the next day you would be able to file for your name change, remove the identity theft restriction entirely. And then as a sort of compromise with folks who maybe would oppose some of this, we've created carve outs with for people who have to register to allow for like a judicial discretion standard. So to get them at least in front of a judge and let a judge decide if they can change their name for religion, status of survivor of human trafficking, marriage, and gender identity. So people can, if we get this bill through, people can indicate that's why they're changing their name. And then the state's attorney's office can object, and then everyone can at least get in front of a judge and have a conversation about it. And we're also trying to remove, we have a publication requirement. You have to publish in a newspaper for 3 weeks that you're intending to change your name, which is expensive and also time consuming and stands to potentially out folks. So our amendment removes that. And it does a few other sort of little kind of cleanup, trying to make the process more efficient tasks, a uniform standard of forms, which would be really useful instead of counties using their own. So that's one big policy shift we're hoping to get through. It's been long overdue, this like ridiculously punitive law. So we're optimistic. And then for marriage licenses and marriage certificates, the Cook County Clerk's Office has filed a bill that we're supporting that would allow folks to change bride, groom, or spouse language on a marriage certificate. And that was inspired by one of our clients who wanted to change his marriage certificate. He transitioned after marriage. And then we're hoping that they will either incorporate into that bill a statewide standard for changing names on marriage certificates, because every county either doesn't allow it or they do, and it's different. One county told the client that they should get a divorce and remarry if they want a marriage certificate with their current legal name. You should not have to do that. One, you'd be perjuring yourself. There's no grounds for divorce in Illinois. Under the county won't let me change my marriage certificate to reflect my current legal name. It's just also an unfair ask of folks. So if the Cook County Clerk's Office doesn't decide to incorporate that, then Chicago House and Equality Illinois we have our own independent bill that will be asking for that to try and create just sort of a streamlined statewide standard. It would be the same standard for changing a birth certificate. And then Equality Illinois has a bill that, if it passes, will remove the requirement of a doctor's note to change gender markers on birth certificates. And we're obviously very much in support of that. You should not, no one knows their gender more than they themselves. Doctors are not necessary to qualify someone's gender. So that would create also a more efficient process. You don't have to run around, get a note from your doctor, send it in. You can just fill out a form, write a check, and mail it in. So those are sort of some big things that are happening this session. And then we are not an outlier in this way because every state in the country has this law, but we are looking at the criminalization of sex work in Illinois. DC and New York have made huge strides on this, and we are in the beginning stages of exploring that here as well. And that's something, obviously a multi-year project, but criminalization of sex work disproportionately harms Black and brown trans women in a really significant way. It won't reduce stigma. There's a lot of sort of collateral things that need to be worked on with that, but those laws need to go.
If I could just interject with one audience question for Elizabeth, do you have a time frame you hope to meet for the name change law in Illinois?
So everything in this legislative session would, if it passes, will be signed into law at the end of May. So we're hoping to get it through. It's in the House right now. We're hoping to get it through the House, hoping to get it through the Senate, hoping to get it to the governor's desk. And then it would go into effect in June if it passes.
That is amazing. That's a lot faster than I would have ever expected anything.
It's been a long, many years of hoping and trying to get this changed. So the backstage stuff isn't as exciting as, oh, we're finally getting it signed. But I mean, I really hope it's a summer of doing a ton of name changes for folks that we've been turning away for way too long.
That would be amazing. And I'm hopeful now that we have a legislature that is clearly open to criminal justice reform. Thankfully, we got that bill signed today by the governor. And so hopefully we can get some traction in the sex work issue as well. I'm pulling for you. Thank you for doing all of this. It's amazing. Taylor, I know that you mentioned that you became interested in this work because of your own fights in healthcare, but I also know that your work directly impacts the healthcare of people, of trans folks specifically. What kinds of issues are you having to swoop in and help people out with?
Yeah, so some of the biggest issues, of course, are just outright discrimination in private and public health insurance. So that includes employer-sponsored health insurance, market-based health insurance, and then things like Medicaid and Medicare. And so exclusions in those plans are something that we are challenging as violating the ACA, the Constitution, and other state laws where applicable. I mean, other federal laws where applicable, and state laws too sometimes. We're also looking at religious exemptions. This is a big problem as well, especially in minority neighborhoods where hospitals may be affiliated with the Catholic Church primarily, and are being trans people are being turned away, surgeries are being canceled. Sometimes they're not even getting access to just basic healthcare services that aren't transition related. And so using religion as discrimination is another huge issue. And just again, discrimination, interpersonal discrimination in general that transgender people face when going to the doctor. And this can start at the front desk with the secretary. And again, people just being turned away because of their gender identity. Because of COVID-19, we've seen a lot of states canceled what they called elective surgeries, meaning surgeries that, where someone's life wasn't imminently in danger. And so we've seen a huge backlog of trans people trying to now renew their insurance coverage, get approval again, and try to get back on the books for life-saving surgeries. And so that's also a really big problem for trans folks. And so there are a host of healthcare issues, and healthcare has been everything for me. And so I fundamentally believe like equitable access to quality healthcare is a human right, and it's something that we have to fight for every single day. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I am absolutely in agreement with you. Healthcare is a human right, and not a selective human right where someone else gets to pick and choose what healthcare you can receive. So I'm glad that there is a champion like you out there on the front lines. Religious exemptions scare me. They terrify me in all kinds of settings, adoption, healthcare. So I'm trying to find the way to phrase this. Are there chinks in that armor? Are there ways to dismantle that? Are we being successful in the court system?
So I think that the biggest test will be when we receive the judgment from Fulton v. City of Philadelphia. Fulton was dealing with a Catholic, I believe, am I attacking the Catholics today? I believe it was Catholic, a Catholic associated foster agency who refused to work with LGBT couples in violation of the city of Philadelphia's non-discrimination policy. And so that was heard back in October before the Supreme Court, and most LGBT issues or LGBT decisions, well, a lot of decisions are issued in June, but so hopefully in June we'll get a good decision out of the court. I'm optimistic, but I think that will really be the first test of the law and see to where the Supreme Court is going and what guidance and direction they're going to give. I think it's going to be a very limited ruling, but we'll see. But it is very, very, very dangerous. And a lot of our work these days is being guided by defensive work. We've seen a huge backlash, and it's being aimed primarily this year at trans youth. State legislators are passing anti-healthcare bills, criminalizing healthcare for trans youth. The provider can be sanctioned, can lose their license, can receive a felony in some states. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then aiming at the ability of trans youth to participate in sex-specific sports, primarily trans girls and primarily Black trans girls, which is again just a huge, amalgamation of racism and sexism and all of the problems of our country aimed at Black people and their bodies and things. So yeah, we are on defense this year, which is, it's fun, but I prefer to be bringing the litigation and calling the shots versus fighting a-holes, bringing ridiculous cases.
That is a great way for me to transition to Judge Quinn. We had the landmark decision in Bostock very recently, surprisingly written by Justice Gorsuch, who I don't know how traditionalism, textualism really fits into his view on this, but how has Bostock changed the field for employment discrimination for LGBT people?
Well, I think that what Bostock does is that in the, 24 states in the United States, it gives trans people some hope. In those states where there's absolutely no transgender protections, it gives people some hope of being able to walk down the street from state court to federal court and say that you violated my civil rights, you violated my rights under Title VII in terms of employment. So that's one important thing, is that it did nationalize your right to employment as a transgender person. In terms of religious freedom, I think Bostock gives some hope to the conflict between rights under Title VII to employment and religious freedom. Specifically, it says they didn't reach that point in the Supreme Court case, but they pointed to the Harris case, which is the only of those three cases that deals with transgender rights. And it said that the employer in Harris raised that employing someone who's transgender infringed upon the religious rights of them as a funeral home. The court said specifically there's no ministerial exception for running a funeral home, and continuing employment for the plaintiff, Ms. Stevens, would not substantially burden the business owner's religious exercise. And even if it did, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has shown that enforcing Title VII was the least restrictive means of furthering the compelling interest in combating and eradicating sexual discrimination. So that's strong language, and that's a good foothold against in this conflict with religious freedom. I'm not allowed to advocate anymore, but I would suggest that someone argue in some of these cases that choosing a religion is a matter of choice, and allowing people to assert the Religious Freedom Act, allowing people to assert freedom of religion as a freedom to discriminate against LGBTQ people defeats the purpose of anyone, defeats the purpose. I mean, it's like saying, I can choose to discriminate against someone. It's like saying, you can carry that further. I can discriminate against this religious group because of my religion. I can discriminate. And if you're choosing that religion, then you're not compelled. You're saying, I want to discriminate. This is one of the great things about this religion. I get to discriminate against people. So I think, I'm not anti-religion. I think it does wonderful things for some people, but religion is not, it's not a trump card. I'm sorry, to coin a phrase. It's not the be all and end all. It's not the last word. The last word is equality and fairness as determined by the courts.
So I'm curious if you have any insight on this. With those doors opened by Bostock, why do we need the Equality Act?
Oh man. Well, why do we need the ERA? We sure as hell do, because we still don't have equal pay for women without the ERA. Why not say out loud that people have rights if they do have rights? Why look to have, everyone having to go up to the Supreme Court and say, well, we can apply this from this and this. Yeah, we need the Equality Act. We need the Equality Act so that you can point to somebody who's discriminated against you, somebody in a housing department somewhere. This law says no, without having to go down to the courthouse to enforce it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Brianna, I believe you have worked with around laws that are targeted at trans students who want to participate in sports. Is that right?
Yes. At the end of last year, I, on behalf of Lawyers Committee, helped to submitted an amicus brief for the Hecox v. Little case, which I believe ACLU led that case. But we joined as amici with National Women's Law Center and law firm Hogan Lovells to really highlight in the Hecox v. Little case, and this goes back to what Taylor was talking about. Now states, more the red states the red states and people in Connecticut are targeting trans youth in sports. So Idaho passed a bill that basically banned trans women from participating in female sports. I believe the law was HB 500. And we joined as amici in the case to really highlight that this law is bad and it's based in transphobia, but really to highlight how that law and laws like those will ultimately harm Black trans and non-binary folks, and also Black cis women who tend to be over-policed in sports. And because I work at the Lawyers Committee, we do everything with the racial justice hook. But yeah, it was really important. The director, so I work at Lawyers Committee, I work at the Educational Opportunities Project. So this issue directly affects education, equal access to educational opportunities. And my director brought he brought the case to me and, do you want to be a part of this? And this was a perfect opportunity to really highlight the intersectionality of these issues, because I don't see them as separate issues. I see racial injustice issues and trans injustice issues as one and the same. So I was really happy to participate in the brief and to just highlight how transphobia is not only harmful to trans people, in this case, trans youths who are also athletes, but it's also harmful to cis folks as well. Cis folks who fall outside of the traditional norms of white femininity, and that these laws targeted at us will backfire and target everybody.
It's especially scary to me, and unlike Judge Quinn, I can still advocate when they start going after our children, right? That's to me shows that the depths of where they will stoop to. So I'm appalled at those actions, and we're so lucky to have organizations like the ones that you work with that are fighting all of this pushback. Let's see here. Taylor, I would love to ask you if what the ACLU is looking at, if you can share as the big picture strategy. Let's say you didn't have to play defense right now from all aspects. what would be the offense that you would choose?
Yeah, so I think the offense, I think that, we would be remiss if we didn't say that this past year for sure was really a wake-up call for this country and for LGBT organizations to take on racial justice as part of who we are as a community. And so those are the issues that we really need to be tackling, and that involves inequities in the criminal justice system and our housing system. Public benefits is another big area of discrimination, or where we see higher levels of discrimination against LGBT people. And these issues, just like as Brianna has so articulately explained, that they are LGBT issues. They are the things that we need to be fighting. The ACLU, of course, comes from a different posture in terms of the cases we pursue having to fall within a lens of, impact litigation. But ultimately, we're here to impact lives. And so if we could be on pure offense, the cases, and again, I think, I'm getting maybe 50% of my time to offense. And so I'm dedicating that to Medicaid cases and cases for incarcerated trans women, challenging prison conditions. And ultimately it's, we want to abolish prison, but the ACLU does not come from an abolition framework, unfortunately. And so constrained by that. But yes, so housing, public accommodations, healthcare, those would be, and criminal justice. I think those would be my top 4 buckets of cases that I would love to just be working on all the time, and not having to, again, fight pseudoscience against trans youth and just bigots.
Continuing on in the same vein, I would love to hear from each of you about what you would prioritize. What is something policy-wise that you would like to, if you could just snap, what would you change right this second for trans people? It could be statewide, it could be locally, it could be nationally. Elizabeth, how about you start?
I think I'm going to end up echoing a lot of what Taylor said, but if I could just snap my fingers, it would be more permanent housing available for trans community, housing that isn't limited by HUD definition of homelessness, isn't limited by HIV status or age. Something I hear from my clients a lot is, I'm not HIV positive. I'm like a 35-year-old trans woman who's about to get evicted, so I haven't been chronically homeless. Shelters aren't safe. I mean, in Chicago particularly, but shelters aren't a solution. I mean, it's better than some alternatives, right? Like, I'm not saying let's get rid of shelters, but more programs that provide stable, permanent housing for folks, I think would be my first. And then if I can pick 2, because I'm always wanting to toot this horn, is decriminalization of sex work, not in demand, not legalization in the model we see in Nevada, but full decrim in every state in the country is, it's the dream. It's been a long time coming. I think it's good. I think we're going to get there. It's just going to take a minute.
Alexis, I think I have an idea of what you would do change, but I'd love to hear it from you anyway.
No, I don't think, I think prison abolition to me be the big thing. In other words, if you said I could snap, I mean, I think there's very few people that should be locked up, and if they are locked up, it should be, restorative, with a restorative, intention. But you can't have 2 million people locked up and think that that's going to be good for your nation. So that would be the one thing that I would, want the most.
That is an excellent point. Judge Quinn, are you allowed to even speculate on something like this?
I can talk about the improvement of the legal system. I certainly think that access to justice for trans people, I think that equal treatment in places like family court, I think that's something that needs to be approved. I think changes in language, in legal documents, changes in language in the courtroom. I've heard stories of and experienced some discrimination in court based on my transgender status. I know one thing that I have started in court is by introducing myself and telling defendants and telling the courtroom what my pronouns are, hoping that that encourages them to let me know if I misgender them, or let them stand up and say, Judge, these are my pronouns. And that's a good thing. So I mean, I think we need, I think the thing I would change would be just everyone respected and treated equally, and not judged, and just open it up so that everyone is more visible and more open and more and that things were more on more of a level playing field.
It's amazing just what basic respect can do for someone. You know, it's such a low bar. I once had, I do trainings on employment discrimination, and I once had someone pull me aside, a manager, and he's like, do I have to? Do I have to call this person by their chosen name? Do I have to call them by their chosen pronouns? And I was like, what if I just started calling you some other name just because I wanted to? Like, you would hate that. That would drive you insane. Like, it's 20 times worse, a million times worse for a trans person, but like, that's exactly what you're trying to do, is you're trying to say, I know better than you what you should be referenced by. It blows my mind that I even had to have that discussion with someone.
Right.
And Brianna, how about you?
I think if I could snap my fingers and just do something else to help the community, I would really want to get in to like community transactional work. Like, I really want the trans community to be homeowners. I want us to have our own districts in cities where we own our own homes. I want to see more entrepreneurship, like, and actually removing the barriers and demystifying the process to empower more trans folks to start our own things. Because the unfortunate reality is, as long as we live in a society that's dominated by patriarchy, white supremacy, and transphobia, and as long as we live in capitalism, not unfortunate for us, but we have to look out for each other. We have to create. We have to not always be depending on people to get it, or depending on people to be kind on this particular day. And it's really about us as a community empowering each other and building equity amongst each other, and really just impact, and really trying to counter the poverty that we're so often put in because of other people who are not trans being able to be in positions of power, because they do have access to wealth, or they do have access to money, and they get to pull the strings. And for me, it's about finding legal ways to divest and reinvest into communities where they've never been invested to. They've never been, they don't know that you can be the business owner, or you can be the person not only making decisions, but also looking back and reaching back and helping those that come behind you, helping those that are beside you. So if we lived in a perfect world where I could snap my fingers and do that, that's what I would want to do. I would want to empower all of us to have our own things and to collectively build together.
That's amazing. I would love to live in the world that you all would create. It sounds amazing to me. And I don't want to pass this up, but Taylor listed, she said if she could snap her fingers, she would have trans reparations. And I think that goes so well with Brianna's point just there. You're having people start so far behind the start line that they're not able to even get into the positions to make these changes. And so that it's absolutely necessary. I agree.
And it's not, I mean, this is something that's being done in South American countries and European countries. There are many communities in this country that are owed reparations for the wrongs that have been done to them. And I think, some people look at it as capitalistic and as adding more, capitalism to the problem. But that's not how I see it. It's exactly like you're saying. You're asking people to start with, one hand tied behind their back, two hands tied behind their back, really, and compete on the same level when for years you've had codified discrimination. And it's just absolutely insane to me that this country can't get it together and pay the debts that it owes. And I'm a debt collector.
I think you might be the only debt collector that I like. Um, so those are all the questions I've prepared, and I was wondering if anybody in attendance had any questions that they would love to ask this incredible panel. This is, to me, a once in a lifetime opportunity to pick the minds of such accomplished, really just amazing advocates. So if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat. You can use the little Q&A button. But while you all are thinking, I would just love to have Elizabeth do a little plug for the TransLegal program at Chicago House. I know how much impact you all have in the lives of trans people in the Chicago area. So if you could just give us the bite-sized view of what you do.
Sure. So the TransLegal program is part of a larger collaborative care program. The Trans Life Care program at Chicago House has like employment resources, access to medical care, housing navigation, and then legal. So we all work as a team, which I think is really helpful. It helps clients kind of stay in communication, stay in care. And it's the legal team is myself and an amazing paralegal named Toya, and we do direct legal services exclusively for trans and gender expansive people, predominantly in Cook County, but we have taken some cases in other counties depending on the matter. So it's predominantly civil, legal name changes, public benefits, and employment matters, discrimination, criminal records, expungement and sealing, and then a little tiny slice of misdemeanor criminal defense. But predominantly those civil areas of law. And then we also do policy advocacy for federal and state and city policies affecting the community. But the bulk of the work is doing direct services. And, it doesn't have to be related to the person's gender. But there's such a significant reporting of just lack of understanding or just outright discrimination, microaggressions, even in legal services communities, that this program was founded to provide a space where people didn't have to be, who are already experiencing, one, the trauma of living in a transphobic country, and two, the trauma that's bringing them most of the time to talk to a lawyer. Name changes are a happy day, but a lot of these matters are born out of stress and trauma. So it's a place where folks can come and they don't have to explain who they are or worry about being re-traumatized and can get their needs met.
And I would also like to say that I am a former intern of the TransLegal Center. I worked with Elizabeth my last semester of law school, and it was a phenomenal experience.
We're so proud of everything Grant is doing. We've had incredible interns, and we were really lucky to work with you. And I'm very, very proud of the work that you've done. It's really cool to hear you talk as an attorney. Really proud.
So we did get a question, and there are a couple of questions actually. Is there a database for trans or gender nonconforming resources or trans-friendly service providers?
I can take that if you want. The National Center for Trans Equality has a phenomenal resource database, especially for ID documents. And I think they may have a list of providers. Trans Law Center definitely has on their website a list of legal services providers in the United States, I think broken up by state and city.
Awesome, thank you. I think this question would be really up for anyone. What do you see as the most commonly missed opportunity for allies of the transgender community?
Self-education, I'm just going to say, I think goes a long way. We live in a world of information, and I think people taking the time to educate themselves before asking trans people sometimes can go a long, 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 long way. It's like, I don't know much about, nuclear physics, but if you give me 10 minutes on Google, I could probably give you a little, summary. So self-education would be something I recommend to all people.
I would say connecting people to opportunities, especially in the job. Like you demonstrate, like airline isn't something that you are, it's something that you do. And connecting people to opportunities, connecting people to your circle, connecting, or even just if you're in a space and you don't see any Black people in the space, you don't see any trans people in the space, you don't see any queer people in the space, then that means you need to be doing work to diversify the space and pulling people into the, that means that there's some type of barrier that's going on that's not being talked about, and that if you are the one that's seeing it, you can do the work to break down those doors and break down those, like, it's not enough to just say, oh, I have a trans friend. How much is your trans friend making every year, right? Where's your trans friend living at? Let's really use our privilege to really bring people in the room that are qualified or that don't have education but have a passion, have a desire to learn. But it's all about leveraging privilege to connect people to opportunities that necessarily wouldn't be able to get into the door. And also for our gay brothers and sisters in the line, letting trans folks speak on their own issues and not usurping opportunities from trans people to talk about their own stories, to advocate for themselves. Like we have plenty of people in the community that, again, are experienced and qualified. And if it's Transgender Day of Remembrance and you're doing a PSA, it would be nice if you actually had a trans person to do the PSA, so they can get visibility. So I think those are the two things that I see.
All right, I think we have time for one last question, and I think maybe Alexis might be in the best place to answer this. How can we better help our trans client understand that if they have not legally changed their name, that they have to sign the names legally on their medical cards?
They have to sign their, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. How?
I think that what the gist of it is, there's, like you were talking about, there's so many, not loopholes, but like you have to go over here, you have to go over there. And
Right.
if you haven't completed all of them, that you still have to use your legal name for certain activities.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. And again, at the very beginning of the whole process, a lot of people assume as soon as the judge says that they signed the order for your name change, that it's going to change all your documents. And it just isn't that way. You have to go each step, okay? And insurance is definitely one of the hard ones, because different insurance companies, they'll change your name, but like your gender marker, that's a major one. Same thing with Social Security. You know, I'll be 71 in May. And so, in my lifetime, I have seen, Brown versus the Board of Education and Loving versus Virginia and a whole bunch of landmark cases and everything. And I see this as part of a revolution, but revolution is evolutionary. It happens one degree at a time. And we have to approach our struggle one degree at a time, and we have to keep refusing to be pushed back a degree. We just have to keep moving forward. And all of those things that are, 3 years ago when I first started doing this, it seemed very difficult, but now I see pathways, and I see changes happening, and they happen. The legal work that Taylor and Brianna are doing, and Elizabeth and Judge Quinn are doing, is monumental, because they're helping to push that further and faster, than it has at any time. but there's a lot of forces allied against us. So to me, you see those, those struggles manifest themselves in a person calling me up and saying, Alexis, I got Blue Cross to change my name and my gender marker, and that's what makes me so passionate about the work that I do, because out of all the jobs I've ever had in my life, I love this job. It's a mission for me, and I put my heart into it. But it couldn't be possible if the attorneys and the people working with the legislature weren't, pushing hard on it, and need to continue to push harder on.
I think
So, Chris, the next time Alex pulls this, I'm not a lawyer and I'm with all these other people. I want you to, just say real loud just what I'm saying right now. Alexis is a champion for our people. I don't care how many degrees she has. She's a champion. She's been in the front lines for us. And you can't be a great lawyer without great support staff. Just don't listen to Alexis's false modesty anymore, okay?
Okay, Judge. Okay.
Judge Quinn's going to hold you in contempt. That is such a fantastic note to end on. I want to say thank you to each and every one of our panelists for, and that is the best word for it, Judge Quinn, being champions for the trans community. You are all my heroes, and I am so happy that I got to sit and talk with you tonight. Thank you for attending. Thank you everyone in the audience for attending. We're going to be sending out the link to the recording for this, so keep your eye out for it. But otherwise, stay in touch with Chicago House. We've got a lot of fantastic programming coming up in the next few months, so we'd love to see you again.
Good night.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.